everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy to be back. I hope you didn't miss me too much. I'm filming this video on Christmas Eve, so if you hear any Christmas noises coming from the background, that is why. I thought that a really great way of wrapping up 2021 and entering into 2022 would be to do a year in review video. I did one last year, and I felt like it was a really good closure to 2020. That being said, I feel like we're still kind of in March of 2020. It's just March 3031st, 2020. But I think that's a really nice bookend to the year. So we're gonna do that. So it's difficult to say what the first thing I made in 2021 was. I was working on the mercerized dress and my working dress at the same time, and my working dress was actually the mocking up for the mercerized dress. I made the working dress skirt partially in 2020, and then I finished it in 2021. And then in between starting the working dress skirt and finishing it, I made the mercerized skirt, and then I made the working dress bodice after I finished the skirt, and then I made the mercerized bodice. So they're very intertwined. But I am going to just show the mercerized dress first and then the working dress second, but they both happened around the same time and started in 2020 and were completed in 2021. I am very happy with how the mercerized dress turned out. The biggest problem with it is that I cut the skirt too short and had to add that ruffle. I think the ruffle would look better. I think the ruffle looks good, but I think it would look better if it wasn't hanging loose. So right now the skirt kind of ends and the ruffle is lengthening it. And you did see ruffles on skirts at that time, but it was generally the skirt ends here and then the ruffle is just kind of over top of it. So that is that's really the biggest problem that I have with it. There are also a couple of fit issues on the bodice, but they're not that big of a deal, and I think for it being my first time draping and definitely the most complex project I've ever tackled, it went really, really well. I'm also very, very happy with the beading that I was able to do, because that was a huge amount of effort. It's the most gorgeous antique beading, but I had to put a lot of work into getting it up to snuff. So I'm very happy with how this dress came out. I only wish that I could wear it more frequently. This fabric is like silk satin in that it will warp if it gets wet. So I can't wear it when it's raining at all, or if I'm gonna really have to be doing anything that could involve getting water dribbled on me. So it's definitely a formal occasion dress. That wasn't my intention when I started it, but that's how it ended up, which is fine. I'm not, I don't wish that I'd made it out of a different fabric, because I think this fabric is the entire reason that I made the dress, so I'm not complaining about the fabric choice. The next one I wanted to talk about is my working dress. Now, this one I actually made the skirt the right length on it, but somehow when I washed it, it shrunk a little bit. So I had to add yet another ruffle to the bottom to lengthen it. And I don't know how I managed to shrink it because I didn't put it in the dryer. I washed it on cold, but somehow it shrunk a little bit. So that was frustrating, but I think the ruffle also looks pretty good on this dress. And this is very simple. This is just the kind of basic bodice pattern. I believe it's the 1896 bodice, 1896 plain bodice from Truly Victorian. And it gets the job done very, very well. I wear this dress more than any of the other dresses that I have. Now, a large part of what I did in 2021 was actually alterations. I have gotten better at sewing since I made some of my earlier projects, and I wanted to improve them a little bit, and that worked out perfectly because being in law school, I didn't necessarily have time to do whole big projects, although I did do one more new project that I'll talk about later. But this was the year of alterations for me. So the first alteration I want to talk about is for my tea gown. I was noticing that the skirt was just not quite full enough, so I added 2 gores in the back, on the back sides, just to make it a little bit fuller. And my perennial problem, it was not long enough. So I took the last scraps of fabric and made this ruffle that I sewed around the bottom just to lengthen it that little bit. And I think it also works because it just makes the whole gown that much frillier and fluffier, which tea gowns are supposed to be. So I think it really does work well. And I'm so much more happy with how the tea gown fits and hangs and how it moves now. that I've added those gores in that ruffle. The next alteration I did was on the bodice that I'm actually wearing now and on the skirt that goes with it, my black skirt. So let's talk about the bodice alterations first. The first thing I did was to alter the back. Just before I started law school, I made a smaller bustle pad because I decided that the bustle pad that I had was just too big. You'll see it in the in my cozy costume symposium video. I'll link it down below just in case, but you'll see it there. And I realized that it was just too big. It just looked very unnatural, and I decided that I needed a more natural, subdued one. I still have that one, the big one, and I might use it for more formal occasions. When I make my ball gown, I might make it to go over that bustle pad, but for everyday dresses, I made this smaller bustle pad, and that meant that my bodices, many of them needed to be fixed because they kind of came down to a point over the bustle, and when the bustle gets smaller, then there's not as much material in there to fill out that point, so I needed to take these points in. So I had to do that on this black wool bodice that I'm actually wearing right now, and I actually just took out the point in the back altogether and just made it go flat across, and I think that looks really nice. And I added some hooks. You can see in this video that it's hooked onto my skirt to keep the skirt waistband from sinking below the bodice line, although you can also see from the video that that did not work out perfectly. But I made the bodice just fit a whole lot better. I believe I also added some boning into the seams. The other thing I did was to add some fish darts, which are horizontal darts at the waistline, just to make it fit better, because this bodice did wrinkle up awfully around the waist and it just didn't look very elegant. So I added these horizontal fish darts just to make everything fit more nicely. And then the most noticeable thing that I added was the large taffeta bow on the front. I just thought that it needed a little something more, and I felt like this fit the bill perfectly. My mother says it makes me look like a package, but I still like it. So now let's talk about the alterations that I made to the skirt. They're pretty simple. I just scooped out the waist a little bit to make it lie a bit more flatly. I changed the waistband. The waistband on the original one was falling apart because I used a very, very cheap, lightweight cotton. And it just did not hold up. So I changed out the waistband, made it much narrower. I replaced the pleats in the back with gathers, and I replaced that cheap Joanne Fabrics hem braid that I had with a wool hem braid or hat braid from Burnley and Trowbridge Company. So that was a very, very quick alteration that took me all of a day, an afternoon even. Well, no, sewing on the new hem braid took me significantly longer, but all of the other alterations took me an afternoon. They were very, very easy. And I'm very happy with how they look, with how they make the skirt look. I feel like having gathers instead of pleats in the back just makes the whole thing much more voluminous. And I like that. That's how 1890 skirts are supposed to be. So I'm very pleased with how that turned out. I also altered my Korean silk bodice for the same reason. It was too big for my new bustle. It was actually, the back point was actually a little bit too big even for my old bustle, my really big one. So it just looked absolutely absurd with my new, more subdued bustle. So I really had to alter that. And I think that it turned out very, very nicely. I also added boning to the sides and back because I don't know why I didn't do this, but when I initially made it, I only boned the center front and the bust darts. I didn't bone the sides or the back. So I put boning in there. And then the most noticeable thing that I did was to add these sheer organza silk sleeve puffs, because I thought that it just needed a little something more, you know? Sheer over sleeves were not nearly as common in the 1890s as they were in the 1820s and 1830s. But there are a couple of examples of them happening in the 1890s. I was inspired by this photograph here, and actually when I was looking for this photograph so I could put it in this video, I came across this photograph of another woman with sheer silk oversleeves. So that is very exciting. And I also think that this woman looks like the female version of Pete Davidson, just more put together. To put it kindly. Doesn't she? Found that interesting. But I'm very happy with how this turned out, and I love how diaphanous and flowy these sleeve puffs are. And then the last thing that I made in 2021 is this green wool skirt. I adore the color green, and I hadn't really made anything in green ever, and I have plans for a green dress, and I've been planning this for ages. I got this fabric Christmas 2020, so it's been in the works for a long time. And for this, I used the 1898 walking skirt pattern from Truly Victorian, and for a while I was a little bit worried that it just wasn't full enough. Although the pattern is from 1898, the general shape would work from 1893 to 1900, because even in 1895, not every skirt was, you know, 10 yards around the hem. I believe this skirt is 4 or 5 yards around the hem. I'm not sure though. Don't take me up on, don't quote me on that. Although mine is bigger around the hem than the pattern says, because I had to lengthen it significantly. But not every skirt in the 1890s, even when the skirts were at their largest, not every skirt was huge. So I thought that I would give that a try, and for a while I was kind of worried that it was just too narrow for me, that I worried that there just wasn't enough fabric in it, until I saw this clip of me walking back and forth, and then I realized that there is in fact enough fabric in it. And I love how this turned out now. I mean, I was very pleased with how it turned out anyway, but even more so, I'm very pleased with how it turned out now that I've seen this clip, and I think that it looks absolutely wonderful. So, that is all I did in 2021. It doesn't sound like very much, but the mercerized dress took about 8 months of time to make. So that is why. That was a very time-consuming project. So that took up the lion's share of 2021. But I am very pleased with what I was able to accomplish in 2020. I made a lot of my older clothes wearable again, because like this black bodice and my silk bodice just were not wearable, because they just did not look good. They didn't fit me correctly. So even though I didn't make them anew, it's sort of like I have 2 new bodices now because I can wear them. And the same goes for my tea gown. That one was wearable, but I just found myself not wearing it very much because I didn't like how it moved and I didn't like how it fit. So it's like I have 2 new bodices and a new tea gown now, which is very exciting for me. Less exciting for you because you don't get to see me make new clothes, but it's very exciting for me. So I hope you enjoyed this brief little wrap up. I will be back in mid-January with another video. It's probably gonna be the next installment in the Time Princess series, and then we're gonna maybe take a little break from that series, but I have footage for one more video left, so I wanna use that up. But I'm not closing down the Time Princess series permanently, just a little siesta from it so we can dip our toes into some other stuff. A huge thank you to Mary Royal, Kit Kat Stitch, Sandra White, Emily Donnelly, and River Shoal for supporting this channel on Patreon. If you'd like to also support this channel on Patreon, there will be a link in the description. Don't worry if you can't, no hard feelings. I'll also put a link to my Instagram in the description, and you should totally go follow me there. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I can't wait to see you next time. Oh, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Tell me what you worked on in 2020 and what your favorite project was of yours, or of mine, or both. Bye-bye.